Hi, welcome back to Grains in Small Places, and today we're going to be making a pumpkin bread. 'Tis the season, right? So we're going to be making it with all fresh milled flour, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so to make our pumpkin bread, I'm going to be using half spelt and half soft white wheat. So you can use all spelt, you can use all soft white, you can sub some einkorn in here. Those are the three best choices, or some soft red if you have that. I love making this type of bread or muffin or anything like that with all of spelt. But as you can see, I'm running a little bit low on my spelt, so I'm going to just do half and half. I'll make sure that I put a link down in the description box below to this recipe. It'll have the weights and it will have the volume, so you can make it either way. Okay, so I'm going to use a total of 240 grams. So I'm going to go 120 of spelt and 120 of soft white. So I'll make sure also to put a link in the description box below for the things that you see me using, like my mill and these grain bins. And my daughter makes these cute little labels for these bins, and she has them in a couple different colors. She has the dark version and a light version, but there's also been people that have contacted her for some special order colors, so I think that's kind of fun. You can save 10% off with my coupon code GRAINY down in the description box below in her store. Okay, so 240 is what we want total. Okay, perfect. We're going to go ahead and take this on over to the mill. Right now we're using my Nutrimill Classic grain mill, and I love the flour that this mill gives me. It mills nice and fine. Also, you can save $20 off your mill with my coupon code GRAINY. I will make sure to put a link to that in the description box below. Okay, and here is our nice fine flour, and I always like to make sure that you empty out this little cup here that has your finer flour in there, and then if this gets clogged, then it can cause your mill to not function properly. Any of the impact mills have some kind of little cup or canister like that. And then directly to the flour, I'm going to add the other dry ingredients. So I'm going to add a teaspoon of baking soda, a teaspoon of baking powder, and then a teaspoon of my favorite salt. This is the Baja Gold salt, and I really have been loving using this for all of our baking and cooking. I also have a link where you can save on their salt and directly from them, and I'll put that in the description box below, and that can save you on your order from Baja Gold if you want to give it a try. It is a little bit more of a wet or moist salt, but it is a mineral sea salt that has most of your trace minerals, and it's unrefined, solar dried, all of the things. So we've been loving using that. And then also directly to this, I'm going to add the pumpkin pie spice. So you can use pumpkin spice, or you can use like a teaspoon of cinnamon, add in some ginger and nutmeg. So just whatever your pumpkin seasoning that you like best, you can use here. I used a tablespoon of the just pumpkin pie spice. We really enjoyed the one from Trader Joe's, and I did do a grocery haul from Trader Joe's like a week or two ago, so I'll make sure to put that in if you want to check out our grocery haul, what we like to get from there. I'm just going to give these dry ingredients a mix here so that they're all incorporated, and then we'll set this to the side and get our wet ingredients ready. This is, I have like a pumpkin muffin recipe, and then I also have a pumpkin donut recipe, so this is kind of like a play on both of those to get you like the pumpkin bread. And then if I'm making this recipe without a crumble topping, but if you are one that likes a crumble topping like I put in my apple cider bread, that recently came out, you could always make this bread and add the crumble topping from my apple cider bread to the top of this, and that would be so delicious. You could even add in some of the like pumpkin spice seasonings or some of those seasonings to that crumble topping. I think that would be delicious. Okay, I'm going to get my scale back. I really like being able to use this, and I like that we don't have to use, like, get everything out like a mixer and everything like that. We can just simply use a bowl. And the first thing is I'm going to go ahead and melt our butter. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put our bowl here, and the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I have this zeroed out. I've had people sometimes asked me like, hey, my measurements didn't add out, and then they figured out that it was that they forgot to zero out their scale in between the ingredients. Okay, so I've been recently experimenting with making my own buttermilk with some cultures, and I really am excited to give it a try here. We're going to use about 150 grams. I'm splashing all over the place. So instead, you can use buttermilk here, or you can add, like, use whole milk and add a little bit of lemon juice or vinegar to it, or you could use like a yogurt. You could also use sour cream, kefir, all kinds of things. You just want it to be or have a little bit of acidity to it, which helps the bread rise. Okay, and then I'm going to zero this out again, and then we're going to add about 180 grams of pumpkin puree. And you can use homemade as long as you strain out some of the water. Or you can use canned. Just make sure you're using the plain canned and not the one that has the pumpkin pie seasonings in it. Okay. And then this is about the perfect amount that I have left to use for like my pumpkin roll, which I have like a sourdough or a non-sourdough version, or one of the other pumpkin recipes I have on my blog. Okay, I'm going to zero this out again, and then I'm going to add about a cup of sugar, which is about 200 grams. And I actually like to use brown sugar, but we've been making our own brown sugar lately, and I do have a video on how you can do that as well. So what I normally would do is take my sugar, add in the molasses, and mix it together really well. But in a recipe like this, it's okay to go ahead and just add those in separately, and you don't have to mix it all together. So it's about a cup of that. So we're going to use about a tablespoon of the molasses. Okay, and then we're going to take the melted butter and put that in here as well. You could use honey instead if you would prefer. You could of the sugar, and then you could also use regular sugar, or you could use olive oil instead of butter if you prefer. Then we're going to add about a teaspoon of vanilla. And then we'll add 2 eggs. I wanted to go ahead and move my scale because I didn't want to be banging and cracking eggs. You don't ever want to mix or put pressure on your scale because that can mess up with the calibration. So make sure before you start mixing or pressing or anything like that that you remove the scale. Let me wash my hands. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and mix up these wet ingredients. And then if you really like a really strong cinnamony or pumpkin flavoring, you can always increase the amount of pumpkin spice in the recipe. Or you could do pumpkin spice and then also add in like extra cinnamon, which I might go ahead and sprinkle in some extra Ceylon cinnamon just because we really like the difference in all of the different cinnamon flavors. Okay, and then if you were using olive oil instead of butter, this would probably, or if you melted your butter all the way, which I failed to do, this would probably mix a little bit more evenly for you. Okay, that's good. I'm going to go ahead and put in the dry ingredients. We'll stir that together. And then anytime I'm making like my donuts or my muffins or quick breads or anything like this, pancakes even, like I like to let the batter sit for just a moment because the fresh milk flour does take longer for it to absorb than like say white flour that you would get just traditional all-purpose flour. And so I like to let it sit 10 or 15 minutes before I bake it, and that way I know that it's already starting to hydrate and everything is good to go. I don't want to overmix this because I don't want to develop the gluten. Now there's no soft white wheat doesn't really develop the gluten, so no matter how much I mixed it, it probably wouldn't be a problem, but spelt can develop just a little bit of gluten. So I just want to make sure that I have everything all mixed. It's okay with these little chunks of butter in here. They will melt throughout. I'm not too worried about that. So while this is sitting, I'm going to let this sit to the side, and then I'm going to go ahead and grease my pan. Now, I think I'm going to go ahead and use some parchment paper on this instead of just greasing it. For my regular yeast breads, I love these stainless steel pans because I can just grease them and it comes right out. But sometimes these like sweeter, stickier breads do better if I put some parchment paper in there. You're going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I like to bake this starting somewhere between 55 and 65 minutes. Everybody's pans are a little bit different. So we'll go ahead and set this, and then we'll check on it, and it may need to go in for up to 10 or so more minutes. So rather than greasing this, I think I'm just going to go ahead and just put the parchment paper down in here. These sweeter breads just tend to come out a little better for me if I do that. I'm just going to cut off some of this excess. Okay, so once this is ready to go and our oven's preheated, that should be time to go after this is sat for that time, and then we can go ahead and bake it off. So I'm going to go ahead and pour this into, I guess I had a little bit of flour on my spatula there. Pour this into here. And I was also thinking, instead of doing the crumble top, you could always sprinkle some like cinnamon and sugar on the top of this, so it would give like the vibes of my donuts, like how they have that cinnamon and sugar on the top. So you could always do that when it comes out of the oven, or even right now if you wanted to have just a little crispy top. Okay, and into the oven it goes. Okay, and here it is. It is done. It smells delicious. It actually took closer to 70 minutes in my oven. And if you wanted to make sure that you don't have anything spill over, like the parchment paper helped me here, but if you want to make sure nothing spills over, my pan is a little smaller. I do recommend a 5x9. This is like 4.5 by 8.5. But a 5x9 pan, or if you have a smaller pan, you could always do 2 little tiny loaves, or put a baking sheet underneath of this. That way if it spills over, it's not all over your oven. But this, we didn't have any spillover, so we're good. I'm gonna let this cool in the pan for probably at least 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and then let it cool out of the pan, and then we can slice it. And I'll let you take a look when we go to slice it. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today while we made this delicious smelling pumpkin bread. I can't wait to cut into it. I'll make sure to put a little clip where you can see what the inside looks like in there. I'll also make sure to put a link to the recipe down in the description box below, where you can make your very own pumpkin bread with fresh milled flour. You can find this recipe and all kinds of recipes all dedicated to fresh milled flour on my blog at grainsandsmallplaces.net. Comment down below what your favorite quick bread recipe flavor is, and if I've made it before, maybe I have a recipe for it with fresh milled flour. If not, it'll give me some great ideas for what we can do in the future. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. And thanks for stopping by Grains and Small Places. Goodbye. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da.